I'm Nolan Beilstein, and welcome to another episode of Gen Z in Manufacturing, a podcast where I interview young people about their journeys in manufacturing, how they intend to influence the industry, and what they are looking for from an employer. For this episode, I welcome Cooper Maddas, a 26-year-old laser operator at Manufacturing Corporation of America's MetalPeak facility, which offers broad-spectrum cutting of various metals and thicknesses for multiple industries, including automotive, medical, and oil and gas. Maddas got his start in manufacturing in high school and has been working in the industry ever since. At MetalPeak, he operates sheet laser machinery and helps train newer employees. Before we hear from Maddas, please make sure to like and share this episode of Gen Z in Manufacturing. To view previous episodes, visit manufacturing.net. If you are a member of Gen Z and would like to discuss your experience in the manufacturing industry, please get in touch with me, Nolan Beilstein, at nolan@in.com. Well, Cooper, thank you for joining this episode of Gen Z in Manufacturing. To kick it off, I'd like to get to know who I'm interviewing a little bit. I just wanted to know how you discovered MetalPeak.
So this was actually discovered by my father, I guess you could say. So the opportunity, however he found it, I don't know if he was searching Indeed or jobs.com, one or the other, but he was in a similar role at a different manufacturing company, maybe 20 minutes away from this facility. The bid came up from that job. He applied. He liked what he saw. He, liked what he was doing at that point. So he really pushed me to, hey, don't sit on your hands. Definitely send a resume if this is something you'd be interested into. Because prior to the joint venture between the companies, it was very lax, and now everything's very fast paced. Everything is escalating at an enormous rate.
How old were you when he told you to put your resume in?
So I would have been 25 at the time. I've only been employed by Manufacturing Corporation of America for about 7-8 months, give or take.
What other kind of jobs have you had in the industry?
So prior to coming to this facility, I was actually at a smaller, I guess you could call a mom and pop manufacturing business. At one point, it was a bigger company and kind of gradually stepped down. So by the time I was hired, there was maybe 7 or 8 employees in total.
So you've been working in manufacturing ever since high school, is that correct?
So I had to take a flex scheduling. I was only in high school my senior year for about 3 periods. And then I was able to leave and go to a job. My dad, working at that facility as well, he kind of said, hey, this guy just quit. We don't have anybody else to really call, or we could go through a temp agency, and that's a lot of paperwork, a lot of hassle. Would you be interested in kind of interning here, giving us a hand? Just, we have an order that's coming up that needs to go out the door. Up until graduation, I was working part-time, and then they actually were able to offer me a full-time position after graduation as a entry-level technician. So from there, I kind of stuck with the company, and I was with that smaller company for around 7, 8 years. And then this opportunity for Manufacturing Corporation of America, which is now MetalPeak, it came up, and I jumped both feet.
As you were going through high school, doing your part-time schooling, part-time working, what kind of options were you weighing as you were thinking about entering the workforce? Were you looking at a college route, trade route, or just going straight into a job?
I have a lot of interest. I like to do a lot of different things. I like to work with my hands and solve problems. But that doesn't translate into sitting at a desk, working at a computer, just, doing that. I like to be around people. I like to solve problems. So that was a big factor of deciding what I want to do. But the other side of it was the financial cost associated with it. So in this area, there are scholarships, there are certain financial ways, as well as federal grants and federal aid, but that always leads to debt down the line. Definitely what weighed my options was, what do I want to do for the rest of my life? What type of monetary value do you put on that? And then translate that into a continued education degree. With that kind of seemed a little out of the realm of possibilities for me. Okay.
I think a lot of these conversations, they turn into a college versus trades debate, and it feels like the bigger issue is more awareness. It's not that either side is wrong or that college is wrong. It's just that sometimes it's treated as the only right answer. So from your perspective, what are young people missing when it comes to understanding what a manufacturing career can be?
I think the freeness of the whole industry, to be able to, look at a product and understand what a product is, but even going deeper than that, design your own product, right? You can't understand programming without understand, how does the machine work that you're going to utilize to make your end product. I think people take for granted a lot of the things that are manufactured, the things you use day to day that were engineered, designed, and then produced. The value is kind of lost on people now. I think that it's not talked about, but industry, especially manufacturing, is what drives the world. Without manufacturing, you wouldn't have any of these things sitting around you. You wouldn't have microphone. You wouldn't have clothing. You know, it all comes down to what people aren't realizing. This industry could really be driven to the point of not even having to work with your hands. You know, but without working with your hands a little bit first, we'll never get to that point. And without people willing to jump in and kind of take the reins and say, okay, I know a little bit about this, I know a little bit about that, use your skills. People will help you develop them, and eventually you might get to the point where you're designing your own products. You're helping the world in a certain way.
Why do you think there is still a negative stigma towards manufacturing and blue collar work?
They hear stories from older people about what used to happen back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, but a lot of those jobs got sent off. They're no longer in the United States. So I think the stigma is just lack of information, the negligence of understanding what actually goes into the business. So with that, it's completely transformed within the last 50 years. Yeah, there's still some manual operations, but most things nowadays are done by high tech machines. And it takes a certain type of individual to operate those machines. So I think people sell the industry short, and they think that everything it's just there for the taking. But certain people have to be able to jump into that role and make these things happen.
So your job specifically, a laser operator, how would you describe that? How would you describe what you do to someone that has no idea what that would mean?
Pretty wild, honestly. Given my background in the previous manufacturing job, that smaller shop, I was doing everything by hand. I was using hand tools. I was using saws and drills, hand drills, nibblers, which is a type of punching tool for cutting metal, as well as plasma cutting. I was freehand plasma cutting. To walk into this facility that I'm employed at and see a fiber laser, state-of-the-art technology, be able to do what it took me 2 hours to do in less than 5 seconds with no burr, no turnaround. You don't have to clean it up, no grinding. It really is just mind-boggling. What used to take everybody or anyone, even a skilled laborer, a skilled craftsman, a day to do, a day's worth of work can be done on a laser in less than 10 minutes and replicated 100 times, 1,000 times, 1,500 times, however many times you want.
You're talking about doing something over and over again throughout the day. A lot of people I talk to on here, they say that they want to be able to find some meaning in the job that they do and see the real world impact that it has. How has MetalPeak given you that sense of purpose?
Well, every day that I clock into the job, it's always something new. It's never the same thing twice. Every day is different. You're always cutting different job orders. It's not necessarily a job shop, because there's a lot of contracts that are going into this at the moment that you are replicating parts, but a lot of the parts are on different scales. So you might have ones that are up to 4x6 parts, and then another one that's only 2x3. They look similar, but they're different, and it's all going to specific applications. So like it can lose meaning after a while, but being so fresh in the industry, I really don't have an opinion. Every day that I go in, though, it's different. It's exciting. I like being able to solve problems and understanding, why did this happen? How can we solve this? How can we move past this?
Going back to the encouragement for people at a young age in high school. Beyond the pressure from teachers or peers, why do you think society gravitates towards that white collar role or the job that requires a degree?
Honestly, I think they kind of got it backwards. They put the horse before the cart, essentially. From a young age, they wanted to pressure us to learn technology and then take that, get some type of college degree, because the world's a fast changing place. And, if you don't learn certain skills technology wise, you'll never be able to succeed, this or that. But on the same hand, they were teaching about the technology, but not the applications of technology. There wasn't a lot of hands-on things you could do. They would teach you programming and coding, things like that, but you couldn't actually go and see, how does this lathe work? How does this laser work? And even back then, CO2 lasers, there wasn't that much information readily available through high schools, colleges, what have you, trade schools. So I think they were pressuring more for the programming and the computer side of it, but not actual hands-on experience on how you're supposed to do it properly.
It sounds like you had a lot of positive influence in your early life towards pushing you in a manufacturing direction. What do you think could help people who don't have familial connections to manufacturing? What could help them make a more informed decision earlier in their lives?
I think a lot of that comes down to community and where you're living, the type of industry that influenced your community. So even in the area that I'm located in, a little bit south of Pittsburgh, about an hour, but this whole area was nothing but coal mining and coke ovens, littered along the hillsides. That all went to the steel manufacturing industry in Pittsburgh. But a closer town to where I live is Connellsville, and that was a central hub for the railroad. So there was all these industries that were, thriving at one point, and now they're not thriving so much. So definitely all hands on deck. There needs to be more infrastructure put into what made cities great in the first place, what made these towns that you grow up in great.
So for people that live, I don't know, in the downtown of a large city, they've never seen a manufacturing factory before in their life. How can manufacturers reach that person who might have a little interest in this? They say they like working with their hands, but they don't know about the opportunities. How could these manufacturing companies reach that person?
If you don't have the means to continue with continued education for a higher education, if you find the right company, that's willing to help you flourish, they help you succeed, kind of push you to do better and be better as a person, as well as, an employee. That's the type of company you'd get with. But definitely if there was some type of training program or even a walkthrough, you know what I mean? Like, encourage more public, inclusion within these companies, not just lock everybody out and you continue with your day to day. Encourage tours, encourage high schools, encourage colleges to come, hey, tour our facility, see what we have to offer, see if any of this stuff pertains to what you guys are teaching. How is the stuff that you're teaching now applicable to what this industry is transforming into? Give some real insight, some real world insight onto what's going on.
You've mentioned that the financial aspect was a big concern for you when you're choosing a career. If you were to speak, it's a tall order, but if you were to speak for the Gen Z demographic, what matters most to them when choosing a career? Do you think it's money, stability, work-life balance, something else? What do you think?
Definitely all. Just a healthy median of all mentioned. Being able to enjoy yourself without a burden of, financial loans from college, or, not being overworked all the time in a factory setting that you would hear about all the time where, back in my day, we used to work 12-hour days, 8 days a week. Like, nobody wants that. So definitely all around, you don't want to be taken advantage of in the sense of, this is your life, this is your time, and that is your money. So all around just needs to be just a circle, just perfect in every way. And if it's not perfect for you, then I'm sure something will be.
A previous guest on here said that young people have a more holistic approach to life, and you kind of mentioned that earlier. You said you like to do a lot of different things. How can manufacturers introduce that kind of approach to their operations? Another person on here said that they move their employees around. They have them doing different jobs. Could it be something like that, or do you have another idea?
Oh, absolutely. So, one of the things that I really like about MCAs are they're making the approach to try to cross train, meaning that you shouldn't just have one person that knows all the ins and outs of how to run a machine, how to run a product, how to run whatever it be, whatever type of machinery is in the shop. They don't want that to be specialized to one person. They want to be able to allow employees to take vacations. If they're sick, take a sick day. Not have that burden over their head all the time that if I don't show up, nobody's going to be able to, production's going to stop, or there might be repercussions even that I didn't show up, so now they're not going to let me take this day off, or I'm not going to be able to have overtime on the weekend because I didn't work all 5 days during the week. Things like that.
I guess I had one more question for you. You mentioned that your first job was more of a smaller setting. You said kind of a mom and pop shop. Did I have that right?
Yeah.
Do you prefer a smaller, more intimate work setting with a handful of coworkers, or do you prefer a large factory with hundreds of people and you might not know all of them?
Personally, I prefer small groups, but on the same hand, this company is still so new. There's still so few employees on the ground level that you do know everybody by name from the bottom to the top. People in the company that live in California, Arkansas, Alabama, they'll walk into the shop and say, "Hey, Cooper, how you doing?" And shake your hand. "Oh, I'm good. How are you?" But it's nice to still have that intimacy, in a workplace. I'd hate to see, anybody stop caring because, well, I don't even know who this person is, or that person just started, so I'm not going to help them. I'm not going to tell them anything. But the fewer employees, the more intimate it is because you guys are working hand in hand. You're all trying for the same goal.
I could be wrong, but I feel like there's a little more of a shift than in previous generations. You'd go to your job, you head down, do your work. You don't socialize with your coworkers. They're not a part of your life at all. But it seems like young people want to have more of a connection with the people they work with. Do you agree with that?
I do. So just in my commute, I probably spend 35 to 40 minutes each way, right? And then most of the time I'll work my 8-hour shift, and sometimes I'll have to work overtime. So there are times where I'm spending more portions of my life at the facility than I'm actually spending in my own home. So yeah, it's nice to know who you're dealing with. It's nice to know people, It's nice to have connections. It's nice to be human. Before, they wanted people to be machines, and now we have machines that are machines, and we just need people to be people.
Thank you for watching Gen Z in Manufacturing. Please make sure to like and share the episode. To view previous episodes, visit manufacturing.net. If you are a member of Gen Z and would like to discuss your experience in the manufacturing industry, please get in touch with me, Nolan Beilstein, at nolan@in.com.